Good afternoon, folks. Reactionary Grounds here. We got Natty Bumpo and Big Mac. How y'all doing? Natty Bumpo, how you doing,
Doing,
sir?
doing great. Doing wonderful this evening. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, we got a small crew today. Everybody's busy with moving and whatnot, but we're going to keep the ship afloat here
Yeah.
for our white brothers.
Life gets in the way.
It happens. No big deal. Anyways, so a lot's been going on. Maybe we thought we could first start out by talking about the Democrat debates, as well as how we can find common ground with our Democrat friends across the aisle, and sort of begin to undermine or um, weaken this paradigm of these two establishment parties, which have a death grip on the country. These two controlled opposition parties that both amount to being our people's enemy, and how we can find a path which can allow for coalitions across the aisle to break the establishment and pave a path forward for America First politics. So, yeah, these are some prompts or some suggestions that we had from our buddy Larry Tyndall, uh, and so I'm speaking on his behalf with these prompts here. But yeah, Natty, what are your thoughts on? Have you seen anything about the Democrat debate, or any thoughts on that, or any thoughts on the
Yeah.
Democrat Party?
I only really watched highlights of the debate, and I don't have any red hot takes on it or anything. It's just, anything I state is going to be stating the obvious. It's already clear that the Democrats have pretty much already abandoned Americans, right? That's no longer their voting base. What was it? Four people, four candidates up on that stage spoke Spanish and appealed directly to the Spanish working class voters. So we can definitely see where most of the candidates are putting their eggs in their baskets on what they think the future voting base of the country is going to be. What do you have? Uh, Cory Booker, Robert Francis, Beto, O'Rourke. Just pandering to the Spanish, to the Hispanic voting base. Uh, Yeah, and in terms of, that's really only my big takeaway from it is that they've abandoned the working class Americans in this country. They're already looking to import a new voter base for their parties. So I mean, and that's not a hot take. It's just becoming blatantly obvious. It's we've known this since about 2014, 2015 is when this really started blowing up. This kind of leftist priority, especially on with what happened over in Europe, where they just, in 2015, when all the hordes of immigrants or refugees, if you will, invaders came running across the borders. And in terms of any kind of coalition that we can make with Democrats, just going off of the debates. Uh, the only candidate that we could really have any coalition with would be the Tulsi Gabbard voters, right?
Right.
She's a bit of an isolationist. She's a nationalist. She wants to pull out of foreign wars, right? She wants to focus on all the some of the crises here at home. The opioid epidemic and all that kind of stuff. But she got shafted at the debate. She didn't get a whole lot of time. What was it? 5 minutes? I think she got 5 total minutes.
Yeah, she's clearly not the establishment favorite, the handpicked favorite. The thing is the ones who get the spotlight at the debates aren't necessarily the ones that the voting bloc supports. I mean, these are the establishment picks. These are the ones that the establishment wants to see um, emerge and succeed and be victorious. So I do think that, in spite of the fact that she appeared, I guess, unpopular at the debate with the amount of coverage she was given and maybe the level of enthusiasm from the probably totally paid off audience, the controlled audience. I think the actual average Democrat voter may have a lot more in common with her and might like her a lot more than what you would be led to believe by the reception of the crowd at that debate right there. Yeah, I mean, even with, I mean, we always come back to this, but with the immigration issue and just the wages, the importation of low wage workers, you know, this is a something that the right and the left should be able to be able to come together on, because the right doesn't like the importation of foreigners because they tend to vote for Democrats, and it means they lose their foothold in the politics, as well as it dilutes our culture, our traditional culture, which Republicans are more than the Democrats. They have been the ones that cherish the culture, the American culture, and the Democrats, they care about the poor, they care about the working class, so they should be concerned about the lowering of wages.
They say they do.
Right, true. They have said that they do. But yeah, then this certainly harms the lower classes. It certainly harms the poorest when they see their wages lowered. We might have a couple friends of the show that might be able to come on here. Let me see if I can have them join here. Give me 1 second.
All right, all right.
Okay, our buddy Sam Fisker might be joining us here. I just sent him the invite, so friend of the show, smart fella.
Good deal.
We'll see if it works out. Anyways, though, yeah.
Yeah, but you were talking about there, like that the Democrats care about the the oppressed and the lower, the working class and the lower class citizens in this country, right?
Yeah.
Well, and this is kind of what you kind of what they're doing with the Hispanic voters who are coming across the border. They're importing a new lower class, right? So this is what you see with the identity politics of with labeling all of the middle class white and the working class white, and they've had their heyday, and even if they live in a double wide trailer in the middle of Appalachia after their factory job went overseas or whatnot, they're still white, right? So they benefit indirectly from all of this white privilege and in the innate white privilege in the culture. If you're white, you're just inherently privileged. And so these new Hispanic voters that they're bringing across the border, it's a new underclass. It's a permanent underclass that's going to be suckling at the government's teat permanently. And I think and then you can just see that they're just pandering to them like crazy, that they think this is the future. And it all depends on whether the average Democrat voter believes what the leaders in the Democrat Party are basically saying. And
yeah. So that's a good point I hadn't thought of.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking there to add a thought earlier on. Just came back to me. Sorry, but this whole thing with Tulsi Gabbard, it's obvious that she has a lot of groundswell, that she has a lot of grassroots support, kind of like what Bernie had early on in the 2016 election. But Bernie got railroaded. He got bamboozled by all these Democrat. What's it? Gosh, I'm blanking right now. The electoral college, the Democrat electoral college voters, right?
Because the super delegates.
Hillary. What's sorry?
The super delegates.
Sorry, thank you. Super delegates all went over to Hillary, even though that the majority of the state in which they were where they were from might not necessarily have voted for Hillary, right? So they don't follow the lead of their constituents. They follow the lead of whoever's running the party at the time.
Right. It's clearly a top-down orchestrated thing, and that's why
Right.
I say that in spite of the optics of who was the favorite and who was well received at that debate, that's all a controlled scene. I mean, the real Democrat constituency, they may be their will may well be thwarted, as it was thwarted with Bernie. But I will say that I think there is something there for the taking. That the Democrats are very much. I don't say I don't think they're as disenchanted with their party as Republicans are with theirs. But I think increasingly the Democrat constituent, the average Democrat constituent, is discontent and frustrated by the Democrat Party for reasons such as Bernie, and probably for reasons such as the way that they're slighting Tulsi Gabbard and others too. So I think there's maybe something to be taken advantage of there, some discontent, some disenchantment, and some possibility for somewhat of a coalition or an alliance that could be had there. I was also going to say that it was so funny. I saw this one clip of Kamala Harris she was chastising Uncle Joe, creepy Uncle Joe, pedophile Uncle Joe, sniffing. Or no, I think she was talking about how he made some supposedly racist remarks about busing, public busing or something.
Well, he's a white man. He's
Exactly.
even if he's Democrat and he's for all these wonderful minorities, he still benefits from white privilege, right? He needs to be crucified.
Well, that was the funniest thing about it was you watch his facial expression. As soon as she started calling him out, he made sure he didn't look back. She was looking at him and pointing at him and pointing her finger, and he was just looking straight ahead, or looking down. He had his puppy face on, and his eyes were downcast. He had his sad face on, and he was all poo-poo sad that, I'm sorry, minorities, that I did this to you. Is his moment of, apology. It's so funny to watch because, he couldn't say a doggone thing back. He just had to sit there and take it because, you're right. He's a white male, and you cannot, when there is any kind of accusation of racism or foul play, racial foul play, you have to you basically you have no alibi. You're supposed to just accept it, or else you're just condemned even more. So it's just so funny to watch him. He's the most powerful of all of them. He's probably going to win the whole thing for the Democrats.
And it's even worse when you're a legitimate creep and you can't really go, it was just a one-time deal. You can't really say that with Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
So he really did have nothing to say. He had no other card to play than to grovel at the feet of the minorities and say, "Please vote for me."
Right. Yeah. He. I don't know. It's like I still would like to see. I'm not as happy with Donald Trump as I was when he first got elected. My hopes were high back then. They're not as high anymore. But yeah. I don't blame that entirely on Donald. But I still would love to see Donald Trump just absolutely trounce Joe Biden in a debate. Because, you remember all those comments that Uncle Joe made about, I'd like to take Donald behind the bleachers or behind the gymnasium and beat his ass or whatever.
Yeah, kick his ass. Yeah.
Oh, man, I would love to see those two have a brawl.
Pay-per-view.
Oh, I'd pay for that.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah, very funny. Freaking Uncle Joe, you goofball. Just go to bed. Old man.
Oh, man. And in terms of...
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
I was just going to say as well that, my next thought is kind of getting off topic from the debate.
So then before you get off topic, let me continue on real quickly with my point, and then we'll spring out of this. Going on what you were talking about earlier with that there's an opportunity here to capture some disillusioned Democrat voters. I really, with the whole process and the corruption of the Democrat Party electoral process, I don't know if that's possible, right? Like if someone had done that if I was a Democrat voter in 2016 and my party had done to Trump what they did to Bernie Sanders, there's no way I would ever vote for that party again, or at least until some radically new leadership is taking place, right? And they tried to railroad Trump. They tried to prop up Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and John Kasich, that nobody from Ohio who stuck in all the way until the end and actually guaranteed that Trump got the nomination, took a whole bunch of votes away from Cruz.
Right.
But if they actually did to Trump what they did to Bernie Sanders, there's no way I would vote Democrat again. But these Bernie Sanders voters are still the same people who tout that, it's not fake news. Trump is not my president. We live in a fascist USA, KKK, go away kind of a deal. They're just absolutely brainwashed. And I don't know if it's going to come home to them because it's it's Tulsi Gabbard. It's a minority who the Democrat party is blocking out. I don't know. We can definitely try to drive it home and, meeting people on the street and just talking to them about the politics. And all we can just kind of point it out. But in terms of a mass migration away from the Democrat Party, I just don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, I don't know. We got Sam Pfister here. Hey, Sam, how's it going there?
Doing good. How about you?
Doing good. Hey, Natty, can you hear Sam?
Unfortunately, I cannot.
All right, how about you try leaving the call?
And, wait a minute. Say something again, Sam.
Testing. Y'all hear?
Okay, I'm afraid I can't.
Yeah, he can't hear you, Sam. So, yeah, maybe, Natty, you can drop out and call back, all right?
All right, sounds good. Continue on.
Okay, all right. Sam, thanks for joining, man. How's it going, brother?
It's going well. How are you folks doing?
Doing good. It's Big Mac and Natty Bumpo here. I'm Big Mac, and Natty just had to drop out and try and call back here. But, yeah, we're talking about the Democrat debate.
That shit show.
Yeah, talking about it's kind of some ideas for topics that our buddy Larry Tyndall suggested. Hey there, Natty. Hear us?
You there, Natty?
He's still getting it together, I think. Natty, can you hear us? Natty. All right, we'll see if he ends up peeking up here. Not sure if he can hear us. But yeah, anyways, so some of the ideas that Larry Tyndall, our buddy, suggested was just to talk about the Democrat debate and also think about maybe what kinds of coalitions we might be able to what kind of coalitions are maybe materializing, potential coalitions between disaffected Republican voters and disaffected Democrat voters, people that are discontent with both sides of the establishment, the controlled oppositions, and seeing what common ground there is and how we can capitalize on that common ground to make some political change. We were talking about immigration, how it affects the poor and the working class, which is used to be at least kind of more of a concern of the Democrats. Whereas for the social justice, that's a Democrat thing, very much so. Whereas for Republicans, there was the concern of our traditional culture being diluted, as well as the fact that the Republican Party and its voting base loses its foothold on the politics because it means that more Democrat voters eventually come in here.
Sure.
Can you hear us, Natty? I don't think Natty can hear us. Oh boy, we might have gotten one person in only to have lost the other.
Great.
Anyway, so did you watch much of that debate, or what do you think about that, Sam?
Well, I tried to watch some of the debate, but it was pretty painful. And I read some of the synopsises and watched some of the highlights of things, and I think we're dealing with a total abandonment on both sides of any sort of a spine regarding the immigration issue. We see, that classic picture of them all holding their hands up for wanting free health care for illegals and stuff like that.
Right.
And it just seems the first debate when Beto Beta decided to I think it was Beto started talking in like broken Spanish or some garbage like that.
Wow. Very brave.
Their absolute attempt to appeal towards a class of people that's entirely hostile to the American ideal is incredible. That they would spend what precious little debate that they actually have in order to appeal to such a to such a demographic is absolutely stunning. And I think a move like that is seriously going to isolate them from a lot of the working class voting base that they're they're kind of trying to go to, but they're actively trying to replace at the same time.
Right.
So, as usual, it's almost borderline traitorous towards the citizens of America what they're doing, but that's a classic method of operation for the past few decades. So I'm really not surprised on how badly the debates went.
Yeah, I can't say as I am either. I mean, at this point, they're just in basically a death spiral. This is common talking point on the right, but yeah, they truly are in a death spiral. They're finally coming to the absurd conclusions of their fundamentally errant premises. They're fundamentally errant presuppositions, and it's taken them down a path of ludicrousness. And so, yeah, now we're finally seeing that, and it's accelerating. But yeah, they're each trying to it's a game of one-upmanship. Of I can give more free stuff, or I can be more stunning and brave than you. To the point where, yeah, they've just really boxed themselves in, almost outside of probably outside of not quite outside the Overton window, but definitely as much more so on the fringe of the Overton window than the Republicans were. I mean, if you look at the Republican debates, they, we're not happy enough that we would have preferred them to be more toward the edge of the Overton window. But yeah, they were much more centrist, and the Democrats are very much fringe toward the edge of that window. It's not going to help them. It's not going to. But who do you think is going to be the nominee for the Democrats, and why?
That's still a toss-up. Between, I would say, well, Biden's kind of the establishment candidate, I would argue, depending on how much the race baiting goes. I would either argue that right now either Biden would have enough power to make it in. I think Warren would be more of a, almost, you want to call a threat. You hear us, Natty?
Natty. Hear us? Poor Natty. He's trying.
Well, I hear one of you. So.
Hey, you got one.
Yeah, Warren.
Yeah, I hear both.
I don't know. I think Warren is going to ride that tide of nation stuff, and Biden's got enough capital and enough of a powerhouse, almost remnant of Hillary, that he might be able to slide his way in. But both of those candidates provide some pretty unique opportunities. If you're accelerationist, I would think that Warren would actually be your can of beans, just because of how stigmatizing the entire concept of reparations is, and the potential it has to bring race relations to a whole new level. Giving people free stuff just because of what they are. That has some serious potential to accelerate the situation that's going on. But on the other hand, Biden is a very touchy individual, and probably could be very well used. Using the pedo angle to show the absolute corruption and rot within the government. So it's very interesting. I'll be very interested to see who finally makes it as the nominee.
Hey, we got Larry Tyndall here too. Awesome. What's up, Larry? How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing well. Straight from my mom's house.
There, Larry.
Awesome. Larry, we got Larry Tyndall, we got Sam Fisker, and we got Natty Bumppo. Trying to keep up with all of our names here. Natty Bumppo, Larry Tyndall, Sam Fisker, and Big Mac McFaddy. Yeah, and that's my real name, all right? So, but yeah, just never remember. You know how you forget your name sometimes, right?
Are you being fat-phobic with that name?
No, why do you think I choose it as my name unless I had serious respect for it? All right, I wouldn't choose anything self-deprecating as my name. I have the highest respect for fat asses. All right. You better as well. All right. Anyways, I think
was that Fister? Was the last name Fister? Sam Fister.
Fisker. Fisker.
Oh, Fisker.
It's not Fisher. Okay. It's not Fister. It's Fisker.
Get it right, Larry.
All right. Yeah.
God dang. Anyways, I don't know who's going to win the nominee. I think it'll probably be Biden, just because he's the establishment player. But I don't know. Maybe the establishment will end up choosing someone like Peter Buttplug, the gay mayor from South Bend. Who knows? But because him and probably, I think to me, it's between 4 or 5 guys. I think Biden is the favorite, and then after him, it comes probably a tie for Cory Booker and Kamala Harris because they got the race card. They're both definitely pretty leftist. And then after them, I think it's a tie for Mayor Buttplug and who's the other one? There's one other. What's her name? Oh, I'm forgetting about Elizabeth Warren. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Warren. Yeah, it's probably
She doesn't
Elizabeth.
have a chance just based off of her robotic kind of relations to people. I don't think she has a chance. I
Well,
think she's out of the running.
could be. I mean, well, Hillary Clinton. There's no one more robotic than Hillary Clinton. But it all depends on.
Yeah,
who
I
the
guess.
establishment
It's all about the oligarchs, who they want.
She's
right?
keeling
Right.
over in a few years.
The
The
anyway.
thing about Hillary Clinton, though, is she had a shit ton of facial recognition, name recognition. Elizabeth Warren kind of does too at this point, not nearly.
Yeah, but
as
it's
much.
all negative.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it depends. I don't know that it's negative for the left. I mean, we would have said, yeah, all the name recognition for Hillary's negative. I guess so. But look how many votes she got. It would be the same way for Elizabeth Warren, I think. But I think probably old Uncle Joe is going to win it, and then. But I don't think any of them are going to beat Trump. I think Trump is going to win it because, well, he's just going steady at this point. I mean, unless something really bad happens that is probably partly outside of his control, and he doesn't respond to it very well or something. I think he's pretty much got it locked away because, I think his approval ratings have been pretty high and they've been pretty steady. And I think there's at least a perception that the economy is doing well, that he's keeping us out of these foreign wars, that he's doing everything
That's
he
a big
can
one.
do. Yeah, and they also believe that he's doing everything he can do to build the wall. Or I think a lot of people believe that, even though not much has happened, there's at least a perception that he's doing everything he can and that it's merely the Congress that's roadblocking him and the courts. But so I think that there's a perception, at least, that he's doing really well and he will be reelected. And just his personality, he's hilarious. I think he's really people just they kind of love him at this point. He's just so damn entertaining. But I would love to see him debate any of them. Oh, he'd just have a field day, especially with creepy Uncle Joe. No shortage of just ways to attack that weirdo. But
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not as confident as you are that Trump will make it into a second term.
oh yeah,
Even if we look at the demographic state of things, I mean, remember he only won Michigan by less than 20,000 votes.
true.
Pennsylvania by like 40, I think it was like 41,000 or something like that. And another one of the crucial swing states, I forget which one it was, but I mean, he won very important electoral votes by, margins of less than 100,000 votes. And
Yeah.
we probably lose about a million white voters every single year. And with regards to the immigration controls, he's been completely stymied on immigration controls, which means that the potential to reverse this demographic replacement, he's basically done none of it. So you got to ask, okay, is his economic, basically the biggest thing he's managed to do is keep us out of those wars. Have some really robust foreign policy things, like what he just did in North Korea, and improve the economy. But is that going to be enough? Because
I would also add that he's there's a couple things he's done as well. One of them was the repeal of the individual mandate and the Supreme Court appointments, as well as other court appointments, would be probably considered big victories in the average Republican's mind.
fair enough. But I think that we're going to see some
absolutely.
serious issues with voter turnout regarding demographics. Because remember,
No doubt.
remember how hard of a race Ted Cruz had. I think
Yeah.
2018 elections, I think they should have been a serious wake-up call that
That is disturbing. Yeah.
we nearly lost Florida, which is understandable because it's been flooded with Puerto Rico. We nearly lost Texas, and we lost a whole lot of other seats to, a lot of Republican seats to these districts that over the past 10 years or so have become, more and more or less white. So
And it
I
looks
don't
like
know.
it looks like California is going to go blue this year too. It's kind of surprising. But
Yeah.
Oh yeah, So I think we're truly facing, how much of Trump's, appeal towards minorities, like the record black unemployment, the record female unemployment. We'll see how much that actually matters.
yeah, we'll
in
see.
the
I am very
elections.
curious. I'm very curious. I mean, this is the big test, right? This is the proving ground for basically the CivNat versus the
Well,
ethnic nationalist argument about whether assimilation is really, to what extent is assimilation possible? To what extent can the logos supersede the pathos, basically? And we'll see what happens.
So it'll be, and if on both accounts, it's a and even if Trump wins, we get 4 years. That's it. That's something to keep in mind. That Trump isn't. I don't think Trump is ever. If we look towards a historical perspective, I don't think Trump's ever going to become a. I think what we truly need would be a Caesar-like figure, and I don't think he's ever going to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
So we have, that buys us 4 years. That's 4 years to network, 4 years to, acquire skills and supplies and things like that.
Get
Because
inserted into politics. Yeah.
After that, it's it's nothing but the establishment.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get someone like Rand Paul or maybe Ted Cruz to run for president and things like that. But I don't think there's going to be another anti-establishment outsider that can really stem the tide of things and not keep rolling over and over and taking us into these stupid wars.
Yeah, and let me make 2 quick points. And I think Larry's been trying to speak up, but he's been polite. He's been letting us keep on talk here. So I'll let you say something, Larry, here in a sec. I just want to say that I want to give a special point of recognition to the Donald for what I would have to say is some pretty admirable stick-to-itiveness with regard to his kind of campaign promise about non-interventionism in the Middle East, as well as with North Korea. He's been definitely quite contrary to the neocon warhawk inclination. He's been very he's abstained from war. He's really, I'm sure, resisted a lot of pressure from all of his advisors, including his stepson. I mean, his son-in-law to succumb to these interventionist ambitions. He's resisted Syria now. And more than once as well. Plus, he resisted now Iran, at least so far. And thank God for Tucker there, because it sounds like the Tuck came in and
that was an amazing
he tucked the
story.
neocons. Yeah. So thank God for that. And then also Trump continues to be resolved to exhaust all diplomatic avenues with the Koreans as opposed to just going straight into bombing the shit out of them as Obama might have done. So I want to give kudos to Trump, and I also want to point out that this does kind of remind us that these neat little theories that we have about Trump is owned by the Jews and he's a Zionist shill. Well, I'm not going to deny that he doesn't have a ton of Jewish friends, and they were certainly his most prominent ally in getting elected. Sheldon Adelson and so forth, definitely. And he grew up in New York City. New York City very much is that's Jewish real estate. Home turf. I mean, the Jews very much have a much larger presence in New York City than anywhere else. The concentration of Jews there is high. So, him being a real estate mogul in that city, he's going to be brushing shoulders and forming alliances with a lot of Jews. So naturally, he has alliances with the Jews, is friends with Jews, and they help him get elected. And he probably is trying to repay the favor to some extent. But I would say, nope, we lost Natty Bumpo there. We'll see what happens with him. But anyways, I would say that even so, he has demonstrated a certain self-agency, a certain independence to resisting their enticements. And then enticement is too gentle of a word. I'm sure they're strong
Coercion.
Coercion or pushing him to get involved in these wars. There's clearly false flags going on or something akin to that, and he's resisted. So. Kudos to Trump, and that will help him get reelected too if he does get reelected. But I think I'm not sure if there's another point. But anyway, you go ahead, Larry. You've been waiting a long time here.
Oh well, I just had a couple points, and I don't know. I had suggested that we discuss this topic, and I don't know if it's already been discussed.
I can't hear Larry right now.
Oh, you can't hear me?
You can't hear Larry there.
I cannot hear Larry.
Uh-oh. All right. Well, maybe drop out of the call and call back.
Yeah, I'll try to drop out and reintegrate.
Okay. All right.
All right. So, what I was.
Oh, hold up there. All right. Go ahead. All right.
Hello.
Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead. Larry.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you, Big Mac. Yeah, I was just gonna. So I was saying that I don't know if this has already been discussed yet, but I think it's worth kind of taking a step back and trying to really look at what is going on as far as the dissident right is concerned, because sure, I mean, we could have another kind of rogue sort of kind of insurgent figure in the White House again for another 4 years. He could continue ruffling feathers. But I think it's really worth taking a step back and examining what is the best outcome for us for 2020. And if you look at the types of the first immigration package that was suggested in Trump's administration, it was the RAISE Act. What the RAISE Act would do, it would cut immigration by half, so 1 million to 500,000. And then basically it would be kind of like a point system, close to the immigration policy in Canada, let's say. And I'm not sure that this type of thing is even better than the status quo. Having pions kind of crossing the border, paying money in remittance, sending money in remittance back home might be better than something like that. Something like that is basically saying we have how many people in China and India have IQs over 120. With this Immigration Act, this is basically saying that 700 million people have access to the United States. These are 700 million people that can effectively replace us. This is not a good paradigm. This is an immigration paradigm that I think is something that both the left and the right will probably push eventually. But it's not good for us. And this is why, call me accelerationist Larry, but I think it's worth considering what our position should actually be from the perspective of the dissident right with regards to the outcome of the 2020 election. Do we actually want an immigration policy like either Stephen Miller's RAISE Act or Kushner's recent sort of proposal, or do we want some sort of instability that we can take advantage of? And I'd like to hear people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think Natty would have the most contrary thoughts among all of us if he. I think he's struggling with the attempt to rejoin the call here. I don't know what's going on, but anyways, my thoughts though would be I think you're kind of right there that that with an eye toward, it's kind of like the slow boil. I mean, you turn up the heat real slow on the pot of water, and the frog doesn't know he's getting boiled till it's too late. And yeah, the incrementalism can be very deadly in the long run. And the long run is what we have to be concerned about most, because we can, people just don't have the attention span to be concerned with the long run. So we have to try to kind of think for society in that way, to think ahead of the game. So I don't know. I'm torn on it because I think Nick Fuentes makes a good point about how politics is always a day-by-day thing. It's always a year-by-year thing. You can't look too far down the road. You always have to deal with the politics that's at hand, and it's a yearly, monthly struggle to maintain your grasp on every lever of power that you can, every political position that you can, and at this point, I kind of have to agree that. Well, I'm not sure. I think it's inevitable either way. I think that with Trump, basically, I don't see a good replacement coming after Trump. I think that what Sam was saying and what you're saying, Larry, is right. That looking after Trump, what's the solution? Because that only takes us 4 more years. Yeah, I would say let's get Trump reelected. Give us 4 more years to prepare whatever we can for the future. but basically, this thing is pretty much it's on the verge of collapse. The whole thing is on the verge of collapse. So, I don't know that that's going to be averted anyways. But we might as well get 4 more years of cover, 4 more years of freedom to kind of tinker with our plans, tinker with our preparations to prepare for, if not a fight in the political system, maybe more of a preparatory phase for the incoming societal breakdown, chaos, anarchy, or whatever the scenario is, where it's a survival scenario. This is something that Natty believes we're coming into. Is it's not really going to be it's not really salvageable. Natty's more of a realist, or maybe not a realist, but I guess you could say a black pillar in this case, where he thinks that we're, rather than preparing for, like standard politics or whatever, trying to win the game, that the game is pretty much a lost cause, and you need to prepare for the survival game, the surviving the black age, or I should say the dark age is coming, where we're going to be harassed, we're going to be sought out, so forth. So yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that if you want to take the accelerationist approach, you don't even really need to. I mean, things are already accelerating, and I think it's kind of inevitable that things are going to they're going to get a lot worse before they get better. But with Trump, at least we get a little bit longer to kind of prepare our networks, establish our preparations, because I don't think that we as a movement are nearly ready for survival mode. I don't think we've networked enough. I don't think that we've prepared. I don't think that we've mapped out a consensus on our ideas either. For instance, the relationship of race and religion. So I think that those things need to be hashed out better. We need to really get networks of, like, ink on paper networks of people and addresses, so that we can keep track of each other, where our buddies are, for the times when we inevitably lose access to the web, to digital communication, and so forth. So I guess, I don't know. That's my thought.
My 2 cents is I would provide a word of caution against the idea that in either a rapid sense, or in a gradual sense, even, that we're going to see the decline and destruction of technology as this sort of cataclysmic end of days. We've been dealing with people that have been anticipating this, oh Lord, since at least the 80s, with the RAHOA crowd and things like that. People that want, they're going to step outside and they're going to feel like some psychic feeling that the end of the world has come and it's time to band up and start purging. And we haven't really seen that in a historical precedent. Big three examples that I can come up with off the top of my head. First one's Argentina. Argentina was on its way to becoming a first world country. Then a series of socialist scumbags were elected in, and they have dragged the country down to the gutters. And there really hasn't been much in the way of a unified white resistance down there against these elements. They've just things have just gotten more and more shit. And sure, the whites are owning more and more guns and things like that, but there's no organized pushback against that. And additionally, Brazil is another one of where you had good, productive, strong growth under some of the military dictatorships, and then once the leftists took over, you saw the decline. And once again, there wasn't much unified action on the right against these elements. And we both know what Argentina and Brazil have become. And finally, there's South Africa. South Africa is the closest case we've seen so far to the absolute shit hitting the fan, a breakdown of society and things like that. And the white populations have just they've walled themselves off personally. They've installed cameras and they've bought some guns, but no one there is no effective coordinated action that is happening. So we're fighting against almost this passivity that's been instilled in us over time, to the point of which we're going to have to do something very, very groundbreaking, very earth-shattering, in order to ferment enough identity in order for people to actually want to start taking action. And I don't know if that's something that can be constructed in 4 years or anything else like that. So that's my kind of sage word of warning against, it's good to be prepared for emergencies and everything, but we're facing a bit of a long road where things, unless someone or something causes a sudden, a very sudden lurching shift like what we saw in 1920s Germany, I'm afraid that people are just going to adapt as humans do and not react to it. So that's a word that's a word of warning that we're not going to have the power suddenly go out one day. We're not going to have the internet suddenly shit out one day. We're going to be seeing a decline of utilities, a decline of quality of life, a decline in food quality, a decline in technological progress, things that we're already seeing, and none of that is very sudden. And I think banking the future of our people on something as chance and absurd as a weather event such as a solar flare or something like a meteor strike or a rogue dictator sending a atomic bomb up into the upper hemisphere to fry our electronics, that puts way too much faith in chance and not enough faith in planning.
Yeah,
So I would say that beware the slow drag that slowly grinds our people and our genes into a dust over the ages, and
yeah,
Absolutely.
prepare to take effective action.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with Sam. I can see a future of a mulatto population of 500 million in the US where people stay home and watch gay virtual reality porn much clearer than any sort of consolidated effort to overthrow the government and make something happen for the 360th time in history. I see that as a much further away.
yeah. Well, it's I think that the kind of the accelerationism is happening regardless. I mean, look at the Democrats. Look at how they're pushing toward the fringes of the Overton window with their rhetoric, and it's partly just a smoke and mirror show. They're probably not going to enact all that, but they're at least moving the rhetoric in that direction that's polarizing the country. And definitely, the crowds like the Antifa crowds, they're getting more common, more emboldened, more normalized, so that the political dichotomy, the polarized political dichotomy, is getting more normalized to the point where the norm is to have these two factions which have huge abyss between them. The alt-right or the dissident right, which is gathering people, and the far leftists, the Marxists, and of course they're just steaming mad that Trump is still in office, and if he gets reelected again, and if he if he actually tries to do something with the wall because he's he doesn't have to try and get reelected again, so he throws his concern for reelectability out the window and tries to do things more aggressively. I mean, that could really ignite something. And regardless, I mean, we just see the left is pushing and pushing more and more extreme, getting more and more angry, more and more demanding. So I think that acceleration, it is right around the corner. I mean, things have accelerated a lot. People are waking up. I mean, they haven't woken up enough, but things are turning the corner to some extent. And I think that it could very well be that 6 years from now, it'll be sufficient to have really caused some sort of awakening. I look at how much has happened in a couple of years here. I mean, it's been kind of co-opted by the Shapiros and the Crowders and so forth, but still, I mean, something has broken through to an extent. And the more that the left is pushed the way that they are, the more it's going to break through. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if the establishment were smart, they would play the long game. They would play the gradual increase in the boiling water, but they don't appear to be taking that path. So that may end up being our help in this situation, but I don't know. Yeah, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, so I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will be to our help. But again, something that Sam was alluding to when he went into detail with those South America and South Africa examples, was that there was there was a crisis that people of our persuasion were enduring, and despite that, the reaction was highly attenuated, highly mitigated, and basically it became more of a kind of a, not even a war of attrition, but kind of like,
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
you just leave me alone, and I'll just kind of withdraw and try not to bother anybody.
Yeah.
I think well, but he did mention 1920s Germany, and one thing that was notable about that was the fact that people lost their comfort in a very sort of menacing way. There was economic hardship that hadn't been seen in a long time since then, and I guess my sort of proposal, my sort of question maybe is what would be something that could achieve that sort of state in the modern era. I think an economic hardship of that caliber is unlikely. However, some sort of civil unrest, some sort of dysfunction in government, or sort of suspension of the activities of government, could sort of foment something of that nature. And that's where my whole slightly facetious but also slightly tongue-in-cheek and serious, do we want to actually advocate for reparations? And I'm not, of course, I'm being a little bit flippant, but it seems that this is kind of, at least this is the kind of manner in which I've been thinking about things. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I was going to add that this whole situation, the more I think about it, I think that really maybe the solution will end up being religion in some ways. And I know not everybody in these circles agrees with me, but we can bring our different kind of theories together and consider them even so. But I think there's some hopefulness about a resurgence of the traditional Catholic Church, and it may not ever get very large, but the hopes for the terrorized white populations, the unjustly treated white populations, their shelter, they will find shelter and solace in the church. And the interesting thing is that, okay, when you talk about issues of race, I mean, it's a hot button issue. It immediately raises the ires and raises the red flags of not just the leftists, but even people that should be our allies, people on the right, the so-called right, the boomer Republicans and just the normie Republicans. Everybody here is race, and the Republicans, they disavow because they're all, they're worried about being considered racist, and the leftists, they just will only favorably consider race arguments if they go in the direction against whites. So as soon as we try to argue from the side of race in any way, as soon as we try to affect the politics directly with race, or directly affect issues of race through politics, I think it's a very difficult game to play. Obviously, it doesn't get very far in politics. That's why we have to come up with these kind of indirect approaches, like immigration quotas and whatnot, are just different indirect approaches. But if we can strive to reignite the flame of the traditional, the true, edified, holy Catholic Church, the Christian West. Well, for one thing, we have not just the issue of demographic replacement. We have a moral issue. We have moral decline, moral depravity in the West, and of course they're interrelated. There's a feedback loop between the two. But probably the reason that we have the racial problems to begin with the influx of foreigners and our displacement has very much to do with moral fortitude, the fortitude to stand by, to be able to stand up for yourself, to stand up for your people, to speak the truth boldly in spite of pressure, and just to speak the truth, just to be truthful and not to have cognitive dissonance, not to speak, to have double think and say things politically in a politically correct fashion, but to have fortitude, to have courage, to have the virtues of a devout Christian, in other words, to be able to resist these subversive moral and demographic incursions, to have the moral and intellectual cojones to resist it. And so what's most important, of course, I believe what's most important is our eternal condition, our eternal salvation. You know, we all want to get to heaven. That's what our end is. That's what we're created for. And that's, you know, ultimately, you know, we're all going to die here. So we're looking to what's beyond this. That's most important. Our allegiance is due first and foremost and above all to God. But as a nice secondary effect, this is not the reason we do it, but it's a nice it's a happy secondary accident, which is that it strengthens our people. It gives our people moral conviction, moral courage to, and Philippe, our buddy Philippe, he makes the point that very much so the Catholic religion, the Christian religion, has been. Nope, I think we lost. We might have lost somebody there. I think we lost Larry. Hopefully he'll come back. I'll continue on for the moment. We can say that it's true that Europeans, through the majority of Christianity's history, have carried Christianity and the church on their backs. They have been the mainstay of the religion to keep it alive and to propagate it across the world. Hey there, Natty. Hey, I can hear you there, Natty, but I hear your computer fan there. Natty?
Is that an issue?
Natty, can you hear me?
I can't hear Natty.
Yeah, I can hear you, Natty, but we hear your computer fan.
I'll dip out and see if I can hear him.
Okay. All right, one second here, folks. 1 second. Want to continue my thoughts, but I'm going to wait for the guys. All right, there's Sam. Sam, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Let's see if I can get Natty to try it again here. Hold on 1 second. Hey, Larry.
There we go.
Hey, I'm back.
Okay, I don't know if Natty kind of half got it working for a second there. All right, we'll just go on now. Hopefully Natty can try again. But yeah, I just paused my thoughts when you left, Larry. But what I was saying was that, you know, basically our people, for their survival, we need unity. We need to team together and fight together as a unit, as a team. And that point of unity, it can and really it ought to be the faith. And it so happens, secondarily, that that's politically convenient because, hey, Natty, can you hear us? I can hear your fan. Natty.
Yeah.
Hey, I hear you. You hear me?
Yeah, keep going on. Keep going
Okay.
on, Steph.
Okay.
Don't let me interrupt it. Just keep going on.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, maybe mute yourself when you're not talking because I can hear your fan. That's the only thing.
Copy that.
Okay. Anyways, though, so glad to have Natty back. But the point I've been trying to make here, kind of long-winded, I'm sorry, but the point I was making was that you know, the Western man, people of the West, you know, us Europeans who are being kind of terrorized and being boxed in here in our own country, you know, it so happens happily that if we could find our faith again, if we could find our Christian faith, our Catholic faith, and seek the Lord and be edified again, be a holy people, we would be unified by our faith. And we would not only be unified, but we would be of a strong mind. We would be strong-willed. We would be steeled in our faith, steeled in our resolve in our faith, and we'd be formidable because of that. And we would have cojones and gumption that we don't have right now. And nothing I think can inspire people to powerful action more greatly than religion. I mean, look at the Crusades and all of the sacrifice and effort that was put into that over religion. Religion definitely motivates people to action, and it unifies people. And we don't have to worry about playing the language game about race and about that whole hot button, all that hot button language. We can totally circumvent that and just unify as Catholics. And to be honest, I was trying to make the point that this is kind of what Philippe was saying, was that Europeans seem to have had a predilection toward, or an attraction, a special demonstrated attraction to the Catholic Church, toward Christianity, just because of how, for the majority of the history of the Church, it was carried by Europeans, and it was grown and propagated, and its theology was fleshed out by Europeans. And so it would seem that it would so happen, or it would conveniently also gather in a lot of white people, because the Catholic Church has a lot of white people. It attracts a lot of white people. So, and the Holy Catholic Church of the past has many times throughout its history been predominantly white, or it certainly has been carried by white people especially. So I think that we would see a lot of unity of Westerners, Europeans, if we did just focus on returning to the faith, returning to our wholly edified Catholic religion. And as a happy secondary accident of that, we would have unity as a people. We would have gumption and wherewithal and drive as a people. We would have cohesion. We would have moral edification, and we would have a way for rallying many white people without explicitly having to say so. Yeah, I think that a lot of our problems would be solved just by focusing on our traditional religion, not the global homo, cop-off brand of Catholicism or Christianity sold in the Vatican today, or in the Protestant churches today, but the true Church of Ages, the traditional church, the High Latin Mass, and so forth. So, sorry, long-winded explanation, but I do think that I seriously advocate for the return to I'm definitely a Deus Vult kind of guy. We have to focus on the faith. That's what matters is eternity. We're here for 100 years. Yeah, our children are here we have generations after us, but ultimately all the generations will pass, and eternity is far longer than our time here on earth, even if you take into consideration the generations after us. What we want is for us and our descendants to be in heaven, because that lasts much longer than here. So focus on the eternal, focus on serving our Lord, our Creator, and everything else will fall into place after that.
I'm gonna play the Protestant contrarian here. I think I'm probably the only Protestant here, on a couple of things. First of all, race is boiling up.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
Into the forefront of everyone, because the tribals in charge have done a wonderful job of spreading diversity all over the country.
Yeah. Hey, just a sec here. Sorry, Sam. I don't know if Natty can hear you, so I just want to let Natty know that right now Sam's talking, Natty. So I don't know if you can hear him, but he's talking about he's playing devil's advocate from a Protestant perspective. But go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so the diversity issue is a massive contributor to racial awareness in this country, because the aforementioned examples I had of collapses, all of them had a reasonable degree of separation that occurred amongst the races. The most classic is South Africa. Apartheid was so rigidly enforced that all of the blacks that were experienced were, more or less, I would call it, domesticated. Compared to here in America, where the diversity poison pill is spread about everywhere. You can drive through small Midwestern towns that you would think would be, nearly completely white, except for maybe a couple of Mexicans, and you'll see mulatto children on the corner. That spreading of diversity everywhere, that absolute destruction of any ethnic white enclave has pretty much forced us and to experience the realism of race in its full force. So that's why we're seeing more and more people, especially the younger generations. I'm sure we've all seen the classic videos of the based Generation Z having all sorts of politically incorrect talk and things like that. But people are starting to get sick of the fact that their hometowns are no longer white, that they no longer have their grandparents' America is gone and it's being replaced by a tidal wave of the third world. So I think that we cannot completely say we're not gonna mention race at all, because that's not I don't think that's a good way to take it. I mean, even the boomers on the Breitbart comments, which are usually the most pro-Trump, the most the most civic of any of them, a lot of the immigration articles and things, the very top-rated articles are about white replacement. People are starting to realize that this is an existential threat to their people, and
right.
so to completely discount and do away with talking about race, I think is ludicrous.
Yeah, I should have meant what I said there. You're right. I would say, and what I kind of meant to say originally, I think I kind of messed up my point a little bit, was that not that we don't have to mention it at all, or that we shouldn't mention race at all, but that we don't have to focus on it. And what I was going to add on, I guess I forgot to say, was that through the church, through the intellectual, theological tradition of the church, and through the reason and all the understanding we have in the church, that to be a Catholic is to be truthful. We, as a Catholic, or as a Christian in general, you should never have to turn aside truth. If you're God-fearing, Christ-loving person, you love truth in all of its aspects, and that in mathematical truth, theological truth, racial truth. So, if you embrace trad Catholicism or traditional Christianity, then you can talk about anything. It allows you to say, if somebody brings up the issue of race, you can say, look, I'm not a racialist, but the truth is, you just focus on it as, I guess it's a thing of tone, the way you tone it, rather than being like an agnostic or atheistic racialist, materialist. You can say, look, I fear God, and because I fear God, I seek the truth, and I heed the truth. And one truth that's clear is that we're different from each other. God made us different, and so you can acknowledge racial truths without making them like your rallying cry, so to speak, or without making the issue of race like your core message or your rallying cry. Like, there are many truths that are important. Many truths are forgotten today. Many truths are deliberately buried today, including truths about racial realities that, as a truth-loving, God-fearing Christian, truth-loving, God-fearing Catholic, you can embrace all truth, and but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the core of your message. Like, we are the party that that is going to we are the white advocate party. No, you can just be, we're Catholics, we're traditional Christians, and consequently, implicitly, we seek truth, we embrace truth, and that includes all manner of things. You can get into everything, but it is about I think being very intelligent. You have to be savvy, because look at how we got into this mess. Our enemies are very savvy. They're very clever, very sophisticated, very methodical and steady in the way that they approach this. They're not blunt. They're not rash or hasty. So we don't have to be hasty or rash. We should approach things with the same measure, or really a greater measure, of subtlety, prudence, and cleverness that they do, and just say things in the smartest way that we can, while staying true to what we need to say.
Well,
the other half of the sentence. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
Sam, you can make your point.
Okay, well, the Sam's other half wants to make a point.
I'm Erica.
Whoa, we got a whammon.
Yeah, they're
all right. What's up, Erica?
Something. I would argue that I know a lot of God-fearing, Christ-loving Black Catholics or Black Christians, and if you look at where the missionary work is currently, you've got a lot of people going into shithole countries, like buy a goat for this person to feed them for a year. All of the money that is collected that stays in this country goes to them poor kids in the inner schools. And so I think if you focused a party solely on religion, whether that's we're the Catholic people of America or whatever, you're going to attract a lot of Gibbs takers as opposed to white people. Most of the people I work with, and I'm in an agrarian kind of field, they were raised religious and they've lost it because there were no advocates for the white Christians. Everything that they did was going to other people, was being squandered. Like, the only thing, I've got a guy who was raised Catholic for basically 20 years, so he came to college. The only thing he retains from Catholicism is that you have to drink all of the communion wine. Like, that's all he's got. And so I think if you're gonna make a party that is solely focused on religion, you're going to be sorely disappointed when it does turn out to be this kind of race cucking kumbaya circle jerk that's got nothing to do with the original point of creating the party.
Well,
what are you gonna
right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Erica.
What are you gonna do when, okay, we're advocating for speaking the truth and like all of the traditions, and you start to have the other races. So like all of the Polish churches in Milwaukee that have been taken over by the Spics, or all of the churches in Indianapolis that have been taken over by the niggers. What are you going to do when those are the people who start showing up? Are you going to close the door in their face? Like, what's that going to do to your image? So,
right. Well,
you're casting kind of a really wide net, and I don't think you're going to like most of the stuff that comes up in the catch.
Right. I think as an addendum to that point, we can argue that, I know it's not real Christianity, but let's say, one of the youngest, and you could argue the most virile and productive Christian sects, aside from Orthodoxy or Catholicism, Mormonism. Mormonism has fallen hard into this trap. Mormonism, what do you think of? You think of, these cute white families with, half a dozen kids and all sorts of cool stuff like that. But now they've been subverted, and now, they're sending their missionaries to Venezuela, and they're being told to marry these Venezuelan converts and things like that. It doesn't take much for the church to be subverted in a way that is innately destructive to whatever race is participating in it. So I think that you're going to have an element, unless you want to form a structure within the traditional Catholic churches of where you can be a strong enough influence, you can be a good enough man, you can have enough pull to bring all of the congregation into a state of mind that is racially aware, so that they can shun anyone that's not of the same race. You're going to have some serious issues with other races coming in, which is why I think, the biggest, if Christianity is to survive in the actual European, if it's going to maintain European Christianity and not the tormented Latin American or African freak mutants that have developed of it, you're going to have to push more towards almost positive Christianity or something like that. Something that has a racial element in it, something that almost plays up the Old Testament racial discussions, because there's a lot of discuss about mingling between nations and the disastrous consequences. We're going to have to take those Old Testament lessons, and we're going to have to push them further forward in order to have a more racially unified church. Otherwise, it doesn't take much. It takes some subversion from the top, and you have everyone following, and everyone following into their death off of a cliff racially. That's what happened in South Africa. South Africa, the people also didn't revolt because all the churches told them to welcome their black brothers and sisters. They were completely mind-fucked by the churches there. So we're going to have to come up with a way of, how are we going to exert long-term control over the clergy, or long-term control over make racially aware all of these congregations all across the country, Or how do we come up with an entirely new structure that, you know, helps serve our people?
Well, the
and brings
idea
it
is
back to
that in the
Christ?
long term, right, if we embrace the true faith, which I'm not saying this is an easy task, because really this task should have fallen to the clergy, but the clergy are corrupted, they're cucked, and so this is a far-fetched thing, but I think it still has to be the priority, because again, you know, nothing is more important than your eternal condition. So it has to be our priority to work on the matter of faith and religion. Even if our leadership is poor, we have to, as laity, as just churchgoers, to do what we can to edify ourselves and our families and those around us with the true faith, the true traditions. And the idea is that, yeah, I mean, your average global homo version of the church today is not going to solve any problems. It'll do the opposite. But the true understandings of things like immigration, you know, moral immigration policy, and issues of race and nationalism, as taught by the Catholic Church in its catechism, its old catechism, for instance, are really quite in line with what we always say. And by the way, Erica, I wasn't advocating that we have a religious party per se, like a Catholic party. Although I think certainly religious elements should be more overt in Catholic parties than they are today. But I was saying more that the core of our movement should not be in politics, but should be in a primarily religious movement, which certainly informs the politics, but is not its own party. So I think they do have to be kind of separated, because the politics will corrupt the religious movement after a while. And I don't know how you can really keep that. It's impossible to keep them totally unadulterated or whatever. But anyways, yeah. So I hear what you're saying, that it's possible that the problem we've seen is that the kind of the social justice mercy of the Christians in the early 20th century really was taken advantage of, to the point where that was a modernist interpretation of the faith. That was a false interpretation of the faith, which certainly bore bad fruit. I mean, if we had a resurgence of the traditional faith, you would have people would have Catholics, Christians would have the moral edification to not, and the wherewithal to not simply just, you know, give somebody money, throw money at somebody, and just think that that's going to solve the problem, because they just want to get somebody out of their face. You know, they're like, here, take some money. Hopefully that solves the problem. When in reality, you know, they're just giving somebody a fish and not teaching them to fish, blah, 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 or just going on with some kind of fantasy by thinking that giving money to something is going to solve it. Maybe some people can't even learn how to fish. You know, we know about that too. So, but the point is that the true faith, before it was severely corrupted, especially in the early 20th century and onward through modernism, it didn't have all these. It didn't the social justice phenomenon that we saw with the public welfare programs. It wasn't a thing before, and so you got to say, well, you know, Catholicism isn't necessary. Catholicism and traditional Christianity does not equal, you know, just cucking and being owned by another race or another people group. That's not traditionally what Catholics and Christians were, even though they had the impulse and the duty to be merciful and to help those who can't help themselves or whatever. And yet, you know, for all those centuries beforehand, you didn't see the Holy Roman Empire or the Catholic or even the Protestant countries being cucked in that way. So I don't think that, yeah, you're right. With the current brand of false Christianity that we have today, the one that's been co-opted by modernists and global homo, yeah, I mean, it's going to be more of the same. I'm talking about a resurgence of the true traditional faith, and that will give us the gumption not only to well, it'll give us gumption, and it'll inform us about the proper way to help people, like to help people that come to us asking for money or asking for some kind of help. You know, we won't just say, okay, we'll just give you money. We'll say, well, maybe I don't know. We'll have a more honest approach to it, I think. So I'm rambling though. You guys, Larry, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would say that there might be a bit of a false dichotomy between whether you want to have a party that is race focused or a party that is religion focused. Not necessarily in the sense that you can have a party that balances both. I don't mean that. What I mean is that historically, this is not how things worked at all. You can see that everybody kind of acknowledges the Anglo-Saxon Protestant origins of the United States, right? So there was kind of a blend in terms of the origins, but the Constitution was written in English, and as I cite frequently, the first Naturalization Act in 1790 limited naturalization to free white persons of good character. None of the Christians who wrote that statement, who ratified that statement, none of the Christians living in the North American territories thought anything of that. It was just what came normal to them and was in no way conflicting with their Christianity. Now, if we were to undertake the task of starting a party where we would kind of let's say ignore the racial aspect and focus on integrating Catholic elements or other elements into it, that would pose a problem. The problem that would be posed is that the people who were trying to gather, who were trying to rally, do not have the mindset of those people living in the 18th century in 1790. We have to revive that in them, and there doesn't seem a way to revive that in them. The type of sort of point of view where you'd be like, yeah, limit it to free white persons of good character. Okay, well, what's next? What's the next law you're going to pass? That law sounds chill, or that law is whatever. What's next? That sort of attitude no longer exists in the mainstream. It is no longer in the collective consciousness. We are in a completely different place. And I don't think it's possible to just to constituents about something that they're not ready to hear. They're not ready to hear that because they aren't the same people. They don't have the same perspective of the people that were hearing that in the 18th century. So it seems that in a way, trying to establish a party that would just integrate sort of Catholic tenets, etc., would be jumping the gun. We are simply not at that point. We do not have a sense of ourselves that would allow us to pursue something that is that sort of I don't know how you say it, milquetoast. It would necessarily need to be radical because the population is not ready for it.
Yeah, I think I would agree that as far as we don't know ourselves as Catholic, or we no longer have an awareness of ourselves as white in this nation, or I should say, we no longer have an awareness of ourselves as Christians, or a true, not awareness, but we don't necessarily envision ourselves as like traditional Christians anymore in the nation, or racial. But yeah, so certainly some progress would have to be made in the background for a while before it would really break through into mainstream politics. I mean, I'm talking about outside of politics. We need to have a revival in our churches, and it needs to be a revival toward a reaction in reverse toward the traditional faith. And I guess in the meantime, politically, the best avenues of attack are things that aren't explicitly traditional Christian or traditional, explicitly racial, but things like immigration policy, or things like, opposing the transgenders, opposing the gays, opposing the pedophile interaction with our children. And you can do that through street activism, like what American Identity Movement does with the transgender book readings, or really any gay pride parade, there needs to be more significant counter signaling in public, counter parades, counter protests, and whatnot, and peaceful pushback, peaceful harassment. So yeah, I think that's the first avenue of attack. And so you take what's most obvious and you say, you present yourselves as like, hey, we're a Christian nation. This is a Christian nation. This isn't something that my grandfather wouldn't have stood for this. My grandfather was a good Catholic man, and yours probably was a good Christian man as well. We have to really look at what went wrong here, and we have to go back. And the most obvious example for why is when you look at these transgenders and these pedophiles. It's like, okay, folks, we clearly went down a wrong branch, a wrong path. We have to go back. We have to be more traditional. We have to return to tradition, and that's the launching point for bringing people into the fold of the traditional faith. And that, I think, as that grows, it will really empower a whole lot of other secondary or accidental movements, such as with any kind of honesty or reaction in issues of race, immigration, etc. But I think I've beat that horse pretty dead with my take on the religious side of it. So I don't want this to become like some. I'm not trying to convert you all here, even though maybe I kind of am, but this isn't explicitly a Catholic podcast. So I think I've dominated the discussion enough with my Catholic perspective. I'll finally shut up. But with I guess maybe we could move on, unless you guys had some more thoughts about that, to another topic.
Yeah, let's see what you got.
Okay. Well, another thing that was suggested, I think, Larry, you suggested this in our private discussion. What was it here? I guess we kind of already talked about it here. You said the question of what pressures should be applied to our people to move them to act and what moved them to act in the past are great points of discussion. Yeah, so I think we already kind of discussed that, at least, unless you guys want to add something to that.
Things just got to get things just have to get worse. And one of the I think we already kind of discussed this, but we do have to have we do see some potential things that might lead to some further awakening. There's always the looming economic collapse that everyone's like 2008 will rise again and things like that. That's always something to keep an eye out for, because if a shitload of middle-aged whites suddenly get all of their pension and their savings and their 401ks completely destroyed, that's a good element of potential unrest and resistance that we can utilize.
Right.
Something that I'm not advocating for anything, but something that people in this school of thought should consider is that sitting back and waiting for good things to come is probably not going to yield what we want. Someone once said that when the goddess of fortune passes by, you must grab her by the hem. So there is no guarantee that anything favorable to us will happen. So something that will have to be considered is that what can be done to increase the uncomfortableness. Can things be modified? Can things be changed? And that's something to be seriously thought about, instead of just a passive, wait for things to happen and things like that. And as for how to make people uncomfortable, I'm not entirely sure. And some of the ways are something I don't think would be very appropriate to discuss on here. But that's something to just keep in mind this whole time, is that in order to save our people, we may have to be the ones turning the thermostat up suddenly and not waiting for a third party to do it instead.
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways to do it is one of the real primers for this could be these doggone transgenders and the pedophiles at the book readings. I keep coming back to that, but it's just it's a no-brainer. I mean, even
it's so powerful.
It is. Your average normie can really get behind that. It's like, yeah, this is just disgusting. Like, hands off our children. That should be a rallying cry, and we need to go into the public squares more. I think basically we're just not doing stuff in public as much as we should be. We should be rallying people in public. We should be holding impromptu events like at a public square of a town or a city, and get a number of our people together, get a megaphone, get some pictures, on poster boards and whatnot. Just a typical kind of protest rally, I guess. But and especially do it outside of the public library. We just need to keep on doing it, and we need to get more of us to come out to it. I think that we had the right idea, like what American Identity Movement is doing, where they show up to these things and they kind of protest it. But it needs to be a bigger spectacle. We need to turn out in bigger numbers. Easier said than done, but we definitely need to. It has to get into the public eye. I mean, because here's the problem: is that we have to get the attention of the normies. We have to find a way to get them riled up, to get them to change their mindset, but they just don't. We watch different news than they do. It's all about what news you consume, what you see. They don't see the same stuff we do, because we go into these rabbit holes on YouTube and whatnot. We see stuff they don't. So we need to find a way to make a scene in a legal way at some of this stuff that they'll naturally be pissed off at, to get their attention, and to invite them to come out to these things. I don't know. That's one thing. I guess kind of obvious, but yeah, I think the other thing is to keep on baiting the leftists. They're their own worst enemy. We have to bait them to reveal their own depravity at these events. The transgender recruiting is a great one. I mean, our buddy Populist Brief, he recently said that he reposted an article I saw that was talking about how there was I guess there was a guy that protested one of these readings, transgender book readings at a library. I don't know, was it the East Coast? You guys might remember.
There were a couple instances. What happened?
The one I'm thinking of in particular, he was arrested for one thing. I don't know, what kind of physical altercation there was, but he definitely was arrested for protesting it in some way. And then the big thing was that there were snipers. Police snipers had their guns trained on him, apparently. So it's like people,
so much for serving and protecting.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess his crime was being too moral. I don't know. Like he showed up to this. That's the disturbing thing, right? Is that like they were there waiting with sniper rifles, knowing that somebody like us was going to take issue with pedophiles, getting their hands on children at a public library, these weirdos. And so they're already prepared with lethal force to essentially to kill somebody just because they take issue with pedophiles playing around with our kids. Like that should tell you, how problematic our situation is.
Absolutely screwed things are.
Yeah.
One possible good approach is to possibly attempt to ally with the anti-abortion crowd, because that crowd already has significant political clout. It already has significant membership, and I would argue that the March Against Pedophilia, at least, has a lot of parallels to the child protection morals that are the cornerstone of the anti-abortion folks. So I think if we can win that crowd over to this, we might have a force to be reckoned with on our side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with any of these things, you just need to bait them, though. I mean, definitely it would be nice to have the alliance, the coalition with the pro-life, even though they're kind of cucky. They're more about tailgating and having a parade than actually solving, issues of murder, like the murder of our innocent babies. But they
can lobby. I mean, look at what they did in Georgia. They have some political clout that it might be useful to.
You're right. That is true. Yeah, we definitely need to try and recruit them, I think. But I think that kind of you're talking about the flashpoint, the way to turn up the heat, the thermostat, with in our politics and our culture, our cultural dialogue is a perfect way to do that. I think the thing that very well could set it off would be if you had we just have to keep on showing up to these transgender book readings, and we have to keep on getting in their faces, keep on harassing them legally, but just protesting them as much as we can while remaining in the law, just baiting them to just show their hand and lash out at us. And once that altercation breaks out, where say like I show up to one of these book readings, and I'm I bring the megaphone, I'm yelling in their faces, and I'm making a scene, and one of them comes up and pushes me, and then I push back, or maybe I escalate it a little bit and I punch or something, and then I get sniped. I get fucking sniped and get killed maybe. That's the kind of thing that would be a flashpoint. If the general public saw that some righteous dude has had enough with seeing pedophiles toying with our children, and then he gets shot for basically just showing up with a megaphone and yelling about it, because in this scenario, the leftist pushed him first. The physical contact comes first from the left, and then he might return and escalate it by pushing back harder or something. But if he gets shot when he did not initiate the violence, and when there's clearly something evil that he's protesting, then that
you want him murdered.
That would piss off a lot of people. I mean, I know it pissed my parents off. My parents are pretty normy.
Yes, but will it piss them off enough?
Right. Who's volunteering? Who's volunteering?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's an issue. But I mean, there's already people volunteering. I mean, there's that guy that got arrested. There's the AIM people, American Identity Movement. I would do it. Nobody wants to get shot, but I would certainly, I would put myself on the line to go to those protests, and I'd do what I had to do. Sure, I would show up to that. I know other guys that would too. And people are doing it. So I don't think it's a question of we can't find people to go to these rallies and protest it. People are doing it. But I think it's a matter of time. And if we vehemently protest it, we make a scene, we yell, because it's a serious evil, they're going to lash out, because the left is more violent. They have less of a handle on their emotions. So they're going to physically attack us. It'll escalate. Somebody's going to get shot. I'm not saying that we want our people to get shot. I'm saying we got to do what we got to do, right? Because we're moral, upstanding people. So we're going to do what we got to do. And inevitably, it's going to escalate. Someone's going to get shot. And I don't know if it'll be a significant enough flashpoint to really initiate the kind of chain of events that we're hoping for. But that's the kind of thing that would do it, I think. The other alternative is, you guys have seen like the Eucharistic processions that Catholics do. I don't know what the Greek Orthodox do, but the Catholics have a thing where they take our Lord in a monstrance, which is like a holy container for our Lord, the Eucharist, and our Lord is displayed in the monstrance. It's like a golden. It's hard to explain. It's just this big, elaborate, ornate-looking golden. I don't know. You have to look it up. Look up a monstrance. But anyways, Catholics do this thing called the Eucharistic procession, where they get together in like a long line, like 50, 100 people, and at the front of the procession is this little kind of tent that's carried by 4 people over a monstrance, which holds the Holy Eucharist, and carried by a priest. And it's basically, the idea is that we bring our Lord into our town to sanctify our town, to bring him into our community, and to sanctify it, to bring him into our midst. And so it makes the place holy. And that's good to do in any place. But you know what that's going to really piss off is the leftists. If we go into a big city, like any of these leftist cities, in a place where there's a lot of leftist traffic, and we just do these these processions, we don't even yell anything. We just humbly walk in the Eucharistic procession, and that's totally going to bait these leftists to throw tomatoes at us or attack us. They're definitely gonna attack us. And I'm not saying that the primary purpose of this is to bait the leftists. That's to demean our Lord. That would be to make our Lord's glorification of our Lord secondary to other political schemes. That's not what I mean to do here. I'm just saying that our cities need edification. Our cities need to be sanctified. And so we got to do that for the sake of our nation, for our cities. But it will happen as well to instigate these leftists to reveal themselves. And that could be another flashpoint, So things like that, I think, are within the realm of possibility. They're already happening, and they're the kind of ways to move things on if you're looking to raise the heat.
I think we just turn up the pressure on everyone. I mean, let's go all the way back to when I was talking about Biden. Biden is such a, he has so many pictures of him inappropriately touching children and stuff. You want to spread the word. You want to get It's bad enough that people thought, oh, Hillary sold uranium, everything. Well, Biden touches and molests children, and there's more than just Biden that does it.
Yeah, and how many
That
times?
has
Yeah,
that's the double-edged sword of not only making people angry at Biden, but it makes people angry against the Democrats. It makes people angry against the left, and it also saps at the very legitimacy of the federal government because there's enough evidence amassed nowadays. Hell, when Pizzagate was coming around,
yeah,
that spread quite afar, and a lot of people were like, "Ah, it's not really a pizza parlor and everything," but it stuck around in a lot of people's minds. It opened that door. It got people thinking and questioning about such things, about the nature of political blackmail
yeah.
and human trafficking.
I absolutely believe that there are major pedophile circles in high up government. I mean, there's no one thing for sure. All right, Bill Clinton rode on the Lolita Express with Jeffrey Epstein. What is it like? Upwards of 20 times.
A
And
fuckload.
yeah, there's
Everyone needs to know that. Once everyone knows that, once everyone knows the fundamental evil that our government represents, because that's one of the I think that's one of the unifying problems, ironically, that we encounter. You can go to all sorts of folks, even communists, and even they'll advocate for the death penalty for pedophiles.
right.
There is still a strong anti-pedophile community and consciousness within the United States that I think, if tapped into and harnessed properly, will be a very, very powerful force in our favor. I got to get out of here, guys, but it was really awesome talking to you folks, and I'll see you guys again next week.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks, Erica.
All right, Sam. Take care, Sam and Erica.
All right.
See ya.
God bless. Bye-bye. Ah, Larry, what do you think? What do you think?
Well, certainly an interesting addition to our crew here, and I'm glad we have them on today.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so lots of good ideas floating around for, we can never anticipate what the actual flashpoint or where the pivot will actually occur. But it's tough. It's tough to speculate. As I said earlier, I mean, there is of course the possibility that that there'll be enough tension and obstruction in the government that will trickle down to institutions, which will cause people to lose their comfort. There's of course the possibility that things like you mentioned might trigger some sort of unrest, like the specter of people's kids being around pedophiles. I have to say that I'm a bit black-pilled on both of those things. My gut instinct says that it's going to take something much more than that. I think people kind of forget sometimes the relative luxury that middle class or even lower middle class Americans enjoy when you compare them to the rest of the world. You have places around the world where people are living with much lower standards, and still there aren't riots on the streets. There isn't some sort of armed rebellion.
Right.
There's a lot more to it than collective outrage. People have to be desperate. People have to be very uncomfortable. People have to be uncertain of their future. And it just doesn't seem to me that those conditions have become ripe yet.
And unfortunately, people could at least have been much more morally uncomfortable, spiritually uncomfortable in decades or centuries past, to the point where they were just bound by their by their conscience to do something. The different types of discomfort. I think you mean primarily physical discomfort. That's the most primal, the most fundamental discomfort, I guess, that will affect everybody. But I mean, at least in the realm of spiritual discomfort, I mean, with the decline of the church and the descent of the church away from its traditions, from its edified understanding of virtue and theology and so forth and truth, the maintenance of morality, of a healthy spiritual state declined to the point where, yeah, we don't we're numbed, we're spiritually numbed, we're spiritually desensitized, we spiritually don't have, as a people, we don't have nearly the knee-jerk negative reaction to things. We're not discomforted by things that would have been morally abhorrent to people 150 years ago. And so, yeah, I mean, a part of it is that the church has declined, and also our material plenty, and they're kind of interrelated as well, those two things. But yeah, the material plenty, our material comfort, and the decline of the church mean that we no longer have the spiritual impulse against evil, which was informed by the edification of our church. And we are so spoiled by our plenty that we don't have a sense of urgency, a primal instinctive sense of urgency to fight for survival. So I agree, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, yeah. And you know, at least the way I view myself, the way I view, there are different people in this movement. There are different components to this movement. There are different facets to this movement. There are the people who are already in the streets demonstrating these book readings or whatever. There are people who are shitlords on Twitter. There are people who are trying to create media content to help spread our message. But I do think there's a necessity for a facet of the movement who are people looking deep into the future.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
And I think that's important, because there are going to be a lot of pivot points. There are going to be a lot of milestones, and we have to be ready to take the correct turn at the fork in the road. Any sort of ideological movement that saw success, that really sort of was on the stage of global politics, let's say in the 20th century, was exactly like that. They had a very strong ideological edifice. They stuck to it. They were intractable. They had a vision. They had systems in place to execute their vision. And that is what the global elite has over us. That is the stranglehold they have over us here in this country. What we need is an alternative to that. We need a system that's as robust, as complex, and as uncompromising as the one they have to replace it. And that sort of design, that engineering, and that struggle should be an essential component of the dissident right.
And I would even say that at least part of that, or maybe one example of that, could be the church. It is complex. It is organized. Yes. It is what's the other word you use? Convicted or strong-headed. It's determined. I can't remember the word you use, but it has a lot of those qualities you mentioned. I mean, and it's interesting because it kind of circumvents the establishment, which is it just owns the political system. It's hard to even get our foot into the political system. But I think people like Fuentes and others have talked about, parallel societies, parallel power structures where we can set up a nemesis for our enemies and kind of begin to build an infrastructure of a network, coordinate coordinate a network, an infrastructure, which eventually could maybe just kind of be grafted or just kind of mirrored into the politics if we get powerful enough to the point where we can hold sway, in the just the cultural dialogue. But it really can't grow. It doesn't seem that it can necessarily grow within the context of politics right now, because it's just so. I mean, we have to try to insert ourselves in positions like James Alsop did, but it's very hard for us to do anything through the political system. It's so entrenched, but it's easier. It's a lot easier for us to return to our faith, in the sense that it doesn't have. Well, of course, there's an establishment there too. I mean, that's the whole reason why we have a global homo church right now. Is there is an establishment there of pedophiles and Marxists and homos that keeps us out of that too. But it's not. There's not nearly as much force, behind the opposition to our growth in the traditional Catholic or traditional Christian movement as there is in government. I mean, there's a lot more violent, coercive force behind opposition to our movements in the political realm than there are in our movements in the traditional Christian realm, traditional Catholic realm. So I think that we can make more headway in forming our parallel society, our parallel culture to the establishment politics and culture through the church. And it gives us that hierarchy, that organization, that structure, the complexity, the robustness, the connection to our past as well. It's so hard to find connection to our past, a cohesive, synthesized, explanation of our identity, of our history. And the church has all that for us. I mean, it's kind of been forgotten in the church as well, but it has its archives. It has its rich milieu of theology and so forth. So a lot of it's kind of like you don't want to reinvent the wheel. I mean, the church is still largely there. It's got bad actors that have infested it in some ways, but in many ways the church is there, and I think it's more there for the taking than the politics. With this traditional Catholic movement that I see and then for the Orthodox Christians as well, they're always traditional. So I don't know, but I was going to say on behalf of Natty, he would say this, which is that speaking to your point, your black-pilled outlook on things, Larry. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of reason to believe that it's kind of the situation is kind of a lost cause. I mean, you look at, even when our culture was more traditional, or it was closer to what it used to be, back in the 80s. Or the 90s, it was still far cry from what it once was, but it was, it wasn't nearly as clownish as it is now. They were closer to what things ought to be. And even they didn't really have much of a reaction to things like Ruby Ridge or Waco. And,
well, there was one notable reaction, but we won't get into that on this live stream. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's something there, but nothing like across, it wasn't like some kind of a Boston Tea Party kind of event.
Right.
Nothing on that level in response. And there should have been, but there wasn't. And that was at a time when our society was more edified than it is now. And so, and then of course, now you've got the Bundys that happened more recently. There was really nobody lifted a hand to respond to that either. The murder of, what was his name? He was their close friend. I don't know. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he was murdered and they were all shut down and people just pretty much went on with their lives as if it didn't really happen. So yeah, it really makes you think, like what would it take to really get people to act? Because my scenario of like a protester at a, like a transgender book reading getting sniped, well, that's pretty abhorrent, of course, but is it really worse than Waco or is it worse than Ruby Ridge? I don't know. I mean, those are pretty horrible too. So it makes you wonder what it would take. I have to agree. And Natty is definitely black-pilled. He thinks that we're going into survival phase. We have to think about how we can carry on the torch of our traditions, of our faith, and our culture and customs through the upcoming dark age, kind of like how the monastics did it, and that's kind of unsalvageable. But so I don't know. Maybe we'll cut it off here though, because I think we're getting on 2 hours now. So.
All right. Yeah. So, well, maybe we should thank our viewers for listening in. Viewers, whoever you are,
Millions of
people
viewers.
that we don't know, we love you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and please tune in next week.
Yes. God bless you all. Godspeed, brothers and sisters. And thank you very much, Larry, for coming on. We'll talk soon. God bless.
All right. Talk soon. God bless.
Bye-bye.